Coming up next on Arizona Horizon's Journalist Roundtable, the Arizona Republic's endorsement of Hillary Clinton. And we'll talk about how Arizona has moved closer to Trump and McCain come November. The Journalist Roundtable next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening. Welcome to Arizona Horizon's Journalist Roundtable. I'm Rick DeBrule, filling in for Ted Simons. And joining us tonight, Rachel Langang of the Arizona Capital Times. We have Phil Boas from the Arizona Republic and Jim Small from the Arizona Capital Times as well. Now, earlier this week, you might have felt a ripple in the force. The Arizona Republic announced an unprecedented endorsement for a Democrat, presidential nominee Hillary Clinton. Joining us, as we said, is Phil Boas, one of the people who was part of the team that made that decision. And I guess the basic question is, how did that happen? I mean, this is the first time the paper has ever endorsed a Democrat in 126 years.
Yeah, it's truly a historic moment for our newspaper, really one of the extraordinary stories over our history. And it shouldn't have been much of a surprise to the loyal readers of the Republic editorial pages, because it's been part of a conversation that has been going on for almost a year now.
Was this an obvious thing, or was this something you really had to agonize over and wait a long time to come up with?
So back about a year ago, November 2015, Donald Trump was speaking at a rally in Birmingham, Alabama, and there was a black man, a protester, who came in, and his supporters surrounded this man and started kicking him and punching him, and they had their hands around his neck, and they finally got him to the ground, and Trump said from the lectern, "Get him the hell out of here." And a couple days later, he doubled down on that, and he said maybe the man should have been roughed up a bit. And when we saw that, we saw the strains of authoritarianism, and we decided to do an editorial then. It was time to warn our readers about this. That's a disturbing sort of behavior in a presidential candidate. And very soon, right about the same time, he got up, and you'll remember, he talked about a disabled reporter for the New York Times and mocked his disability, made fun of him. And I remember myself thinking, if my teenage son had done something like that, I would have been horrified and embarrassed. And that clearly is not the kind of conduct we can expect in a president. So we were beginning to disqualify him as far back as then, and we did a series of scathing, scalding editorials about him over 5 or 6 things that we saw as disqualifiers.
Now, those in the anti-Trump camp would argue, what took you so long? Why did it take this long to come up with that decision?
It really was unfolding. We were in one of the most extraordinary elections of our time. None of us have seen an election like this, or a candidate like Donald Trump, this force of nature who is vulgar and is doing things that we've never seen in candidates before. And so it unfolded in sort of an unusual way, where we basically on our pages made it impossible, as we wrote our editorials through this progression, to ever endorse the man, because what we had written about him was so extremely critical.
As
you couldn't go backwards.
As so many other people have struggled with this election, is this an endorsement of Hillary Clinton, or is this a move against Donald Trump?
It's both. I mean, it is an endorsement of Clinton. We look at Clinton and we see somebody who has respect for the office, who treats this process of the election with decorum and with respect. You don't see that in Donald Trump. Donald Trump gets on a national debate and talks about his genitalia, okay? That's a man who doesn't respect the process or the office. And if your leaders have no respect for the important offices in this land, the important institutions, then nobody's going to have respect for them.
But Hillary Clinton comes in with a lot of baggage.
She
there
does.
are those who say she is not really the person that should be president in this country. You could have taken the middle road and said, this is a year we're not doing anything.
We could have, but we think now the most important issue has become keeping a dangerous man out of that office. And the only way you're going to do that is with Hillary Clinton.
Okay, this is the first time since the paper was created in 1890 that you have not endorsed a Republican.
Right.
What has been the impact of that? I mean, Trump himself was tweeting out today that people are canceling their subscriptions. What's the impact of that?
It's been enormous. I mean, it begins with really angry phone calls, people screaming at me, screaming at our other editors, and emails, and just raw anger. But we also got a tremendous amount of support, and as the week went on, it was amazing the outpouring of support that came in. You know, you had people who were canceling their subscriptions, and that got out in the news. And then you had people, not only in Arizona, but from all around the country, who were calling in to start subscribing to the Republic in response to that. They wanted to support what they thought was a courageous move.
All right, courageous move, but Jim or Rachel, I guess, no offense to Phil and the Arizona Republic, in this day and age, does it matter?
You know, I wondered that. It seems like sort of an antiquated process endorsing someone, especially with our media landscape being so dispersed now. But I looked up some studies that had been done in the 2008 and 2012 election that showed if an endorsement is surprising, as this one is, it goes counter to your history, then they do have a little bit of an impact. Now with Trump's voters, I don't know. I mean, this fits into a narrative that they've created that the media is the enemy. You know, the media is endorsing Hillary Clinton. They're the enemy. This fits in with exactly what they think. So I don't know if you'll see them kind of like having a come to Jesus moment or anything like that over an endorsement by, you know, the lamestream media or whatever you want to call it.
Jim, does it change the landscape?
You know, I mean, I think obviously, you know, kind of Rachel alluded to it. I mean, the editorials I don't think are ever really geared at the people who are dyed-in-the-wool partisans one way or the other. You know, I mean, they could have endorsed Donald Trump, and it wouldn't have changed the people who are rock solid. You know, the Hillary Clinton supporters. That wouldn't have changed it. This likewise won't change anybody who was solidly in the Donald Trump camp, and you know, who's wearing the Make America Great Again hats. That's not going to be the person that they're speaking to. But for those who are in the middle, you know, those, you know, I'm sure most people have friends or family who've kind of looked at this election and gone, boy, what am I going to do? Like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't like either candidate. Maybe I usually vote Republican, but I don't like Trump, and I don't know that I can support Clinton. And so I think that this is the kind of thing that speaks to those people, the conflicted people. And I think that it was clear, certainly in the editorial, that the board grappled with a lot of those exact same feelings. And you know, that it was kind of like all right, we're conflicted, here's how we resolved it, and here's where we ended up once we kind of sat down and mulled it over and thought about it. And it's almost a roadmap in some ways, I think, for voters to at least consider, if not follow.
USA Today has also come out against Trump, owned by Gannett, the Arizona Republic owned by Gannett. Is this a corporate decision? Some are going to say comes from the top down.
It's not a corporate decision. In fact, the Detroit News, one of our sister papers, came out in favor of the Libertarian ticket. So it was all a local decision on our part, and it doesn't happen without a publisher with a spine of steel to do something, to break with history like this, because we were hit with an onslaught. But we're having a discussion with our readers right now. And especially with Republicans. I'm a lifelong Republican. My parents were both Republican. My grandparents were Republican. We have Republicans all throughout the family. My wife looked at that endorsement and she said, it's going to be an interesting Thanksgiving. And I really believe that a lot of Republicans, we've seen some nastiness from Trump followers, but there are a lot of really decent, good people who support Trump. And I hear it in their voices. I talk to Trump voters all the time. They've been angry with us for a year. And I hear little qualifiers. They understand that this guy has a lot of shortcomings, a lot of personal shortcomings, a lot of character flaws. They know it instinctively, that he has characteristics that violate their own values. And they're willing to make compromises with those values because they so despise Hillary Clinton or the Obama administration. But this has become bigger than that. Donald Trump has done things, you know, the embracing of a Russian dictator, a man who is setting himself up as an enemy of the United States, you know, to embrace that man, to invite the Russians to hack fellow Americans. That's really disgusting behavior. And it's time for those really responsible Republicans, they need to open their eyes and be honest about this, and need to acknowledge that that man cannot serve in this White House. He's a danger to the country.
We haven't seen any major newspapers endorse Trump yet, and I do wonder if that will happen. And he's even said some things that give people who do news for a living a lot of pause. He's mentioned opening up libel laws. That's something that our profession would be completely impacted by. And then, you know, all of the things that you've mentioned. So I just wonder if there will be any newspapers considering all of this record. And newspaper folks, you know, they tend to be more of the establishment crowd. You know, they're reasoned. You know, they like politics, how they work. You know, they don't support radical things usually. They're more established. So I wonder if you'll see a movement of papers endorse Trump, or if that's just not going to happen at all. We haven't seen any yet.
Trump is he's rolling back. He wants to roll back First Amendment freedoms. I mean, it's hard to understand how any newspaper would be able to support him knowing that.
You mentioned that Detroit endorsed the Libertarian candidate. Was that ever on the table for you guys?
No.
Because?
No. Because we understood that the United States needs to keep him out. American voters need to keep him out of the White House. The Libertarians have not done the work they need to do to be viable on the presidential stage. They're just not viable. A Libertarian is not going to be president for any time in the near future, and they're not going to be this year. So your only other choice is Clinton. It's a binary choice, and it's not a choice between Democrat and Republican so much as a choice between responsible and irresponsible. He is demonstrably irresponsible.
All right, let's move into our next topic, which is actually going to tie directly to that. Larry Sabato, who runs the Crystal Ball, he calls it, from the University of Virginia Center on Politics, earlier this week moved Arizona from being leans Republican to likely Republican for both Trump and John McCain. Obviously, that comes before, of course, the Arizona Republic made its statement. Surprising, or just kind of the natural course of things, Jim?
No, it's a direct reflection of the polling that we've seen in the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Basically post after Hillary Clinton had that bad week or 10 days, that really bad week or 10 days, and polling that came out after that, national polling and even some state polling, showed things moving in Trump's direction, and I think that movement, certainly on the presidential side of that, is a reflection of that. It's not terribly surprising that Arizona, is kind of moving from squishy red into more solidly red. Arizona's always been, with the exception of the Bill Clinton election, has always supported Republican candidates, hasn't supported Democrats. So the fact that Arizona was ever in play to any degree, I think, is really surprising, and I think speaks to the unique nature of this election. But it's obvious too. I think the campaigns have recognized that Arizona's ability to be picked up by the Democrats is not what it once was. Even a month ago, the Hillary Clinton campaign spent about a month on TV here, was airing about $250,000 in ads a week. And that stopped. Today's the first day they've gone dark. They're not up on the air right now. So I think that's a sign that their campaign is looking at the landscape and going, okay, we thought we could make a play in Arizona. Things haven't worked out. We haven't maybe moved the needle on that, so we're going to take the foot off the gas and reallocate our resources elsewhere.
That's the presidential race. What about the Senate race? Is this because McCain is so strong or Kirkpatrick is so weak?
Like Jim mentioned, there's been a lot of polling recently, and a lot of it showed that McCain had a sizable lead over Kirkpatrick. And for a lot of people, they thought it was closer than that, at least colloquially. There hadn't been a lot of recent polling until this past week or so that showed, there's a bigger spread than we thought. And McCain has so much more money than a lot of other candidates. Whatever happens nationally kind of affects him as well. If there's people who would vote for Trump who might move to Kirkpatrick, but it's shown so far that it doesn't seem to be that way. It doesn't seem to be as much of a potential to get a blue Senate seat as people initially thought.
Phil, is McCain simply the 64,000-pound gorilla, just impossible to topple?
He's a global figure. He's really an important guy internationally, and And with the advantage in registration, it's enormous in Arizona for Republicans. It's so interesting to watch McCain run for office because he runs scared and he is so energetic, going all across the state. I think it's his competitive nature. It was so interesting that he would not give in to this, repudiating Donald Trump. And I know he wasn't doing that. This is my take. Not with any inside knowledge, but I'm sure he was doing that because he's so competitive. He's not going to give an inch to his competitor. They would love to see him cut himself off from Trump voters who are also his voters, and he wasn't going to do it. McCain is thinking a chess move ahead. He's thinking about how do we hold on to our Senate majority, House majority, if in fact we've got a Democrat in the White House. And he needs to win his race.
So he's playing the long game and not worrying about
I think
the
he's
short
playing
game.
the long game, yeah.
All right. Let's move on to a topic that was discussed earlier in the week here on Horizon. And we're going to start with the economic side, but then we're going to move to the political side. And that's the fact that the Hispanic market now in Arizona's purchasing power is $42 billion. $42 billion. They're talking about the growth of the Hispanics in Arizona, and more importantly, the growth of their purchasing power. So if their purchasing power has grown so much and the population has grown so much, why hasn't the voting power grown as much? Everybody keeps talking about the Hispanic vote that is still asleep. Where is it?
I think that there's a lot of groups trying to figure that out. And I've heard of groups like One Arizona. They've registered like 75,000 new Latino voters. I think they're hoping for over 100,000 before the general here. But actually getting them to come out to the polls is another story. And in the past, the Latino Democrat groups would use ballot harvesting to try to get more Latino turnout. Now they can't do that. I wonder if that might actually have a negative impact on turnout this year, despite the fact that there's a presidential candidate who's been pretty vocally opposed to immigration, which is obviously an issue for Latino voters. It just depends on, what happens in the next couple weeks here. Is there going to be more from Trump, hammering in on immigration that they say, okay, I'm going to leave my house today and vote because this is worth it. This affects me. This affects my family. This affects people that I hold dear. Or does it kind of remain this sleeping giant that's been so mythical for the past decade or so?
I mean, how many times have we had this discussion
Exactly.
over and over again about the Hispanic vote? But once again, you look at the economic numbers and it's tremendous. And I guess what is the disconnect?
Well, there was a really good story, I think it was a New York Times magazine, the last couple of weeks, that explored exactly this idea. Was, okay, Hispanics have grown nationally into such a large chunk of the population. Why is that not reflected at the ballot box? And essentially, the conclusion that the reporter reached was, there's that foundational aspect of voting that is so important to so many different groups, that Caucasian voters generally look at voting as something that's fundamental to what they do in civic life. African American voters, it's something that's very, very central to a lot of people. It's a right that was fought for very hard, and that has been kind of instilled in people from generation to generation. That doesn't exist for Hispanic voters and largely for Asian American voters. If you look at the data. And the idea was essentially that, I remember when I was a child going to the polling place with my parents. My parents were active and they voted and they took me with them. And I've taken my son to the polling place. And it's that kind of a thing that the article said, that's what's missing from the Hispanic voting populace, that there isn't an importance given to voting by folks, by the elder generations. And so that apathy gets passed down, just the same way activism gets passed down in other ethnic groups. And so the idea was, you can't change this. You can't turn this ship on a dime. It's like turning a cruise ship. You've got to give it some time, and you need to put in generations worth of effort to get this to waken this slumbering Hispanic voting beast. You can't just expect it to be like, oh, we've got a candidate, we've got Joe Arpaio on the ballot, we've got Donald Trump on the ballot, or whatever the issue of the day is. You can't expect that to suddenly, start it like a key in an engine.
And we did some polling recently with the Cronkite School and the Morrison Institute here at ASU, and it shows that if you could crank up that engine, it could have real impact. Hillary Clinton has a 30-point edge with Hispanic voters in Arizona. Imagine if you could get all those people to the polls. That would have a tremendous impact on that.
By the way, Jim, when I take my son to the polls, I just go over to the counter, I show him how I sign the envelope, and then I send it off. It's a much different experience today than probably when you were a kid. Earlier this week here on Horizon, we had a debate between Paul Babeu and Tom O'Halloran, both running for Congress in District 1. We're talking about how McCain is going to be so strong in Arizona, Trump likely still going to win, and yet everybody seemed convinced that Paul Babeu is not going to be able to pull it off, at least at this point. A lot of ads being played around here in Phoenix in the media. Why not?
This is a district that I think that Democrats have held. It's kind of gone back and forth between Democrat and Republican, but the Democrats have currently hold it. I think that there's an advantage, an inherent kind of built-in advantage, small advantage for Democrats, and combine that with the fact that Paul Babeu, has been scandal plagued for the last really 4 or 5 years, and a lot of that has I think tempered Republican support for him. He got through the primary certainly in a crowded primary race, but I don't think Republicans, the Republican establishment and Republicans down here in the Valley were necessarily terribly excited about his candidacy. And certainly national Republicans have kind of taken a wait-and-see approach to it, and so far they're still waiting. They haven't jumped in with any money to help bail him out, which I think is an indication that when they look at the race, they don't see it as something where them spending $1 million is going to make a difference. And conversely, the Democrats have poured a lot of money into it and are now starting to actually back off of that money, which again, another sign that the Democrats feel like the race is fairly comfortable for Tom O'Halloran.
The Babeu ads against O'Halloran keep referring to him as tax and spend O'Halloran. They're trying to really pound that home. Can that make a difference at all?
To the extent that Paul Babeu has a name ID, it's a negative name ID. And so I don't know that a lot of people are voting based on, this is a great candidate in O'Halloran, more as they're voting against Babeu. So I don't know if that message really goes, gets driven home, and if it does, to whom. He just seems like he's got so many scandals in his past that's hard to surmount with a negative ad on tax and spend. When you could have a negative ad against Babeu, that's a laundry list, basically, of things that have happened to him in the past 5 years.
Just a couple minutes left. This morning on the Arizona Republic, there was a large article about the new head of the VA clinic here in town, a lady named Rima Ann Nelson, coming from the Philippines. She has actually been in VA's hospitals around the country. Some questions about her history. And we can't really talk a lot about her at this point, but the significant thing is she's going to be the 7th head of the VA clinic here in Phoenix, 7th head in 3 years. What does that say about how good of a job we've done in addressing the problems, Phil?
We once had the head of one of the national veterans organizations in to talk about the VA scandal that was unfolding, and I asked him, is this an old story or a new story? And the reason I asked him was because I grew up in Phoenix, and my father was a physician at St. Joseph's Hospital. And I remember my dad, every time we'd drive by that VA hospital, he'd say, "That's the dregs of medicine right there." And he'd say it so much, "Yeah, Dad, we know.
Yeah, but several years ago, this was brought to everybody's attention. This is considered ground zero for this problem.
Here's the problem, and we've said this before. It is a chronic problem, chronic dysfunction in the VA because of the job it's trying to do. They've tried to create a shadow medical system for veterans, and it's so inefficient, and it doesn't work, and it hasn't worked, and efforts over the years to try to reform it haven't worked. McCain has the right idea on this, and he's insurgent on this. He wants to bring in his choice card and try to privatize the VA, which it should. That's what it needs to happen. And we've said this editorially as well. You need to take all those traditional medical needs that veterans have and move that into the private sector, where you're going to get greater choice, you're going to get speedier care, you're going to get better care than you do. And you know where you see this, where you have veterans who actually have choice, veterans who can go to the VA system or go to the private system. They go to the private system. So that's the kind of reform, and then let the VA center and focus on military-related, war-related kinds of maladies or illnesses and things. So.
All right. Well, once again, I know it's hard to believe, but we're out of time. And we haven't even gotten to the other 10 topics we were going to talk about. But I appreciate the time. Thank you so much for being here tonight and talking about these issues. Of course, we'll talk about the things we've also got coming up next week. Monday on Arizona Horizon, a new report that identifies the factors impacting early literacy here in Arizona. We're also going to hear about the nominating process for the City of Phoenix first ever Poet Laureate. That's Monday at 5:30 and 10 on the next Arizona Horizon. Then on Tuesday, the City of Phoenix's transit improvement in a special edition of Arizona Horizon will give you a complete analysis following the presidential debate. I'm in for Ted Simons. We hope you have a great weekend. Take care.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you.